Hey you guys, Kaosy Umeh here, aka Attorney Know-It-All. So welcome back you guys. I'm here today because I just left a consultation with a client, well potential client, and he was seeking a divorce, but towards the end of our consultation, an issue came up that instantly triggered me and reminded me of this video we're about to watch. And basically, he wanted to know if he can get a paternity test for his middle child. His middle child is around 7 years old. His oldest is 8. His youngest is 3. Yeah, his youngest is 3. His oldest is 8. The middle is 7. And during the time the child was conceived, him and the mother were going through some problems. So well, after we got done discussing how much he'll probably have to pay for child support should he leave the house first, he wanted to know, could he get this paternity test for this middle child, the 7-year-old child? And I have to say, I recommended against it. And the main reason I recommended against it is because if the main issue he's worried about is child support, chances are that he does have to pay child support for this child because this child is now 7 years old. And for the first 7 years of his life, this child has known only one father. So let me play this video because I want you to see that these laws are more or less, I think these laws are probably similar the whole countrywide, but I saw this in Michigan and I wanted to show you how Michigan treats this. And of course, I'm in Maryland, so I'm going to explain to you what the Maryland law is. So let's get started.
Happening to men across Michigan, they are being forced to pay child support as dads by default.
So I'm going to pause it. So Maryland, we don't call it child by default. We have a presumption of fatherhood when you are, or a presumption of paternity when you are married and you have a child. When you're not married and you have a child with a woman, you have to sign the affidavit of paternity for the court to consider to have that same presumption applied to you.
Doesn't matter if the men can prove the children are not theirs. Michigan law makes them pay anyway.
But tonight, 7 Action News reporter Kim Russell tells us that may be about to change.
Most people think you either have to adopt or conceive a baby to become legally responsible for a child. Under Michigan law, that is simply not how it works.
Okay. So I will again say in Maryland that you do have to either be you have to be married and have the child in wedlock for you to have that presumption of paternity. Or when the baby is born, you have to also have signed an affidavit of paternity. And this is typically for those who are not married. When they go to the hospital and the baby is born, you usually present it with both a certificate of a birth certificate, and then you also present it with an affidavit of paternity. If you sign that affidavit of paternity, then you fall into the category of where they presume, when the state presumes that you're now the father of this child. So you now become legally responsible for this child.
I was the father by default.
These 4 men came to the 7 Action News studios to raise awareness. You could become dad by default. There are a couple ways it happens. Pastor Edward Mack says his previous wife had 3 children. He loved them as his own.
So I'm going to pause it here. As I spoke about earlier, this is where you're married and you have children with this person. There is that presumption of paternity, that presumption of fatherhood. Obviously, one of my favorite sayings is mama's baby, daddy's maybe. That's basically what this is. The state already knows mother is the mother of this child when she has this child in the hospital. And when you're married, the state presumes that husband is the father of this child. But again, if you're not married and you're presented with an affidavit of paternity and you sign it, the state also presumes that you are the father of the child because you signed this affidavit of paternity.
Then he realized 2 of them were not biologically his.
You must have been so heartbroken.
Kim, it was a hurting thing. I don't even really want to talk about it because it brings tears to my eyes. Sorry for getting teary-eyed.
Pastor Mack says the betrayal led to divorce. He was shocked when the judge told him because he was married, he became dad by default. He had to pay support for another man's children.
Let her pay for him. Let her get the man she laid down with to pay for him. He goes free.
Okay. So I'm going to stop this video here because the other cases here, they deal with a father by default, a dad by default. But again, Maryland doesn't have that. In Maryland, you have to either be married and have this baby. And I know I'm keep repeating myself because I feel like people really need to understand this. If you're married and you have a child, the state is going to assume that the married parents are the or the married wife and husband are the parents of this child. But again, if you're an unmarried and you have a child, unless you sign that affidavit of paternity, the state does not presume you're the father. But however, once you sign that affidavit of paternity, it is then assumed you're the father. So in my case, as I said, I advised my clients against doing the paternity test. The only reason he should do it is if he really needs it for his own clarity, for his own peace of mind. But if he wants to do it to somehow avoid child support payments, I'm going to say that I believe that at this point it's probably already too late. The main reason I say it's too late is because of the age of that child. The child is 7 years old. The child is old enough to know who his mother is and who his father is. If he was in the middle of a crowd and they go, "Where's mommy?" he could point to mommy. "Where's daddy?" he could point to daddy. Chances are he could probably even tell you his parents' full names. 7 years old, this child has gone their whole life believing you to be the parent. That makes it very difficult for the state to now come in at age 7 and state that father is no longer responsible for this child. So it's my belief that should he file this paternity test and it comes out to be negative, he still has to pay this child support. Now, there's a very slim chance that he might not be able to. I mean, he might not be forced to, but that would involve him. I'm trying to remember the case laws I've read about this. And again, in the case law I've read, it tends to deal with younger children, because that's also my advice. If you at any point suspect that this child is not yours, you want to get them tested, and you want to get them tested young and early. When you're claiming that a 7-month-old is not yours versus claiming a 7-year-old is not yours, is a completely different outcome. The younger they are, the less the state is going to assume that this child, the less the state is going to state that this child is emotionally attached to you and has only known you to be their parents for the whole lives. A 7-month-old's whole life is still only 7 months. So the courts are willing, if you come in and you can prove the 7-month-old is not yours, it's very unlikely the courts is going to make you pay child support. But 7-year-old, those are going to be based on the circumstances. And even then, it's going to be a very hard case for the court to go, yes, this child isn't biologically yours, so you don't have to pay. Because remember, we still live in a country where we promote adoptions. We don't feel like only natural parented parents should be responsible, or basically should get the benefits of parenthood. And that also means we don't feel like only natural parents should get the burdens of parenthood. It goes both ways. So in my case, I am going to advise my client not to go forward with it. However, if he does choose to go forward with it and he wants to fight us, there is some case law there, but I would also advise him to be prepared for the worst. I don't want anyone going into this with a 7-year-old believing that there's a good chance they might not have to pay child support. Be very prepared to pay, and if you don't have to, then that's the best case scenario. But in his case, the other reason I'm advising him not to is just how sad he sounded when he was talking about him and when he was talking about his son. I don't want him to go through that emotional trauma, because imagine going to pick up your other 2 kids who he believes are his, and then this other child is just there, this other child who he loves. He loves all his kids, but he's just worried. Like, I'm just imagining that emotional trauma that's going to come to him should this test come out negative and this child isn't his. And then there's also the question, do you want to now test the other 3 kids? Again, your oldest child is 8 years old. It's even less unlikely that the court is going to say you're not going to be financially responsible for an 8-year-old. But in this case, well, in the case of this YouTube video, I'm just going to point out, and I'm not sure when they showed the picture. Yeah, this is the picture they showed of his kids. So to me, these kids, they look relatively young. At least this one over here looks very young. And I don't know how old they are, but I'm guessing this one over here is a toddler. So maybe if this is a child, this toddler age looking child that is blurred, maybe if this is a child he's claiming isn't his, maybe in Maryland he might be able to get away without paying child support. But I have to say, just based on the fact that there are 3 kids and the rest, their faces are blurred, and I can't really tell you how old they are. But I do know that the courts really take in mind how something like this wouldn't just affect that one child who might not be yours, but it will also affect the rest of the children. And I would always keep telling, A, my mother is mama's babies, daddy's maybes, and B, if you don't think this child is yours, test them and test them early. Early. The older they get, the less useless it is to test, especially if the only issue is, do you want to pay child support or not? And I feel bad for this client. I feel bad for this guy in this video. It sucks. There's no other way around that. And it's not just the financial part that sucks, it's also the emotional part that sucks. Actually, I think it's more the emotional part than anything else. One thing about an attorney, especially when it comes to children, I've had so many parents break down in my conference room, both fathers and mothers, and it's just, and you can tell it's not the money, it's just this, and it's, ugh. Anyway, I hope this video helps some of you out there who are in the middle of some of this and you have some questions. Feel free to leave me any questions or comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. If you do like the content that I'm putting out, please feel free to like and subscribe. And until next time, I will talk to you later. Ciao.